Coming up today, we're going to get our fall beans and carrots planted. Volunteers in your garden, and we're not talking about people coming over working for free. All that and more coming up today on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener is sponsored in part by, for all your non-GMO, organic, and heirloom vegetable, flowers, and herb seeds, visit dollarseed.com. Sioux Growing Supply, located in Wausau, Wisconsin, focusing on certified leaf compost, an excellent amendment for poor soil, retains moisture and adds nutrients, which equals less watering. Available in labor-saver, pre-filled trays and pots, bag and bulk. Visit SiouxCompost.com. Organic fertilizer for the health-conscious organic home gardener. Family owned and operated. Visit thewiveggardener.com. Don't poison your soil with municipal water. Attach a body, mind, and soil hose filter. Free shipping exclusively through the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Just click on the body, mind, and soil icon. Authentic Haven brand soil conditioner for the home gardener. Easy to brew. Visit ManureTea.com. No measuring, no thinking. Stamp it, plant it, stop plotting, start planting. GardenStamp.com. Welcome to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. I'm Joy Barrett. We're in the back side of the garden and we're going to do some fall planting. Now, based on what you plant, you want to make sure you have the adequate amount of time up to the average last frost date in your area. Now, we've got two beds back here. We've got a brassica bed that we once thought was Brussels sprouts, and for whatever reason, whether the seeds got mixed up, whether the seedlings got mixed up, we had some broccoli, and again, we failed at that, but we're going to take advantage of the stalks here that we can potentially use as maybe broccoli slaw. And we got our pea bed here that we've harvested the peas that are good, and we've also harvested the peas that are dry, and we're going to save those for seed for next year. Now, what's going to go into these two beds? The brassica bed we're going to clean out, and we are going to put pole bean trellises and grow Blue Lake pole beans on. The pea bed here, well, we do have some kale that we've placed inside here because we have an abundance of kale. We're going to extract everything out of this bed except for the kale, and we're going to plant carrots in the square foot method. Now, with the kale in here, if the kale wasn't in here, this bed would be 4 foot by 10 foot, which would give us 460 carrots, so we backed that off based on where the kale is to probably about 380, 390 on the carrot level. We're going to use the garden stamp, which will identify the correct distance that all the carrots need to be, 16 per square foot. So the first thing we got to do is start ripping this stuff out gently in the pea bed so we don't ruin the kale here and the brassicas. Here's the thing, when we extract these, we're going to try to pull the weeds and the plants and everything, all the roots out, for two main reasons. One, it's going to be much easier to work the soil and get the proper nutrients and top dress it with compost if all the roots are out when spading. Second being that by getting all the roots out and the grass out, you're going to try to eliminate the possibility of more seeds from or more seedlings emerging from the soil, meaning if you leave roots in the ground, some of these weeds propagate from roots. So by getting as many roots out of the soil as possible, that's going to greatly reduce the amount of weeding that we're going to have to do next time around. So we're just going to start taking this thing apart and then getting ready to plant our fall beans and carrots. All right, so we got our beds cleaned out here. Holly and I spent a couple of hours taking the weeds out and the old peas and whatever peas pods that we did find, we went ahead and saved those so we can plant those next year. A couple things we did. Anything that didn't have a seed pod or seed flower on weed-wise, we went ahead and put in our compost pile. The thistles that had the seed flowers on them already, we went ahead and just took them out and threw them in the trash because our compost does not get hot enough to kill those germination, the seeds. And if we would have just put them in our compost pile, then as the compost broke down, the seeds would still be viable, and we would be putting that compost back in our garden next year with all those viable thistle seeds. So that's something that you can decide whether or not you want to do. Then we went ahead and top dressed. We used a bag of certified leaf compost from Sue's. I was a little lighter on the carrots because you don't want a whole lot of nitrogen in the soil with carrots. They can become very hairy. They can also, based on how much particles are in the soil, they can split. Then you have two legs on them. So we kind of really wanted to be limited over on this bed. Now over here, the beans create their own nitrogen, but again, I just want to take and top dress with this beautiful leaf compost in these beds, and this will bring a lot of worms into the soil as well. So we've got our 3 pole trellises that we have made a couple years ago. Now if you want to see how we constructed these, there'll be a link in the show notes below on how to go about making one of these with pieces of items that you probably already have available. So we got 2 short ones and then we got a tall one. We're going to put the 2 short ones on the edges or the ends and the tall one in the center. Now you kind of have to be creative in putting these in the ground because you're going to have to hammer them in, or you could put a stake beside it, whatever you want to go ahead and do. So I'm just going ahead and temporarily put that one in there. And you can take a board and put on the top and then hammer this in, because if you just hammer the PVC pipe, it's going to break that PVC pipe, and we've done that a couple times. So we're going to get these sorted out here, and then we're going to come back in, we're going to start planting our beans, and then we will move over to our carrots. All right, so we went ahead and got our pole trellises in the ground. With the 2 small ones, we went ahead and hammered them in the ground till they felt secure, and then we went ahead and tamped around the base. With the tall one here, this one's about 6.5, 7 foot tall, we went ahead and did that as much as we could. Then we went ahead and strapped a post and put that post in the ground just to add more stability to it. Now we're going to be planting Blue Lake pole beans around each one of these. Now these are elevated a little higher than what I'd like, but I feel that with other beans that we've planted, they'll go ahead and reach up and grab the string, or they'll reach the sky, so we shouldn't have an issue. We've been pre-soaking our beans in Moo tea for about 4 hours now. You can also do that up to 12 hours or overnight. And it's pretty easy to go about planting them. We're just going to go underneath the trellis here we've got strings here. This one has 30, this one has 9, and that one has about 25, 24 in that. So we're just going to go around, just going to make a trench, and we're going to drop them in. You don't have to be precise with one directly underneath every string, but you know, with the amount of strings that you have, try to equal at least the amount of beans that you put in the ground. And I'll go ahead and go around this one, and I'll do all of them, and then we'll come back in and we'll water them heavy again with Moo tea to condition the soil, because the soil needs just a little help. We've added the Sioux compost, we're going to add the Moo tea, and get the soil back enriched the way it needs to be. All right, we got all of them planted. We're just going to give them another good watering with Moo tea. And then we will move over and get our carrot bed planted for our fall harvest. Okay, so I'm finishing up here. Got a few extra seeds there. So we've got this all planted with our carrots using the garden stamp. Now all of the markings are still in the soil. We've not covered anything over. And you can do 2 different methods of covering the seeds over. You can take a pitchfork or your garden fork or the rake and just drag it over top like we are here. Or you can also take what we're going to do, or take Moo tea and just water gently over the top, and the soil will cover the seeds. Now, carrot seeds, based on who you talk to, should be planted anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. They'll take about 70 days to reach maturity, and they do taste a little sweeter when the nights get colder. Beans over there, 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep, they take about 70 days to reach maturity as well. but they're not frost tolerant at all. So you want to be sure you plant those in enough time in the fall that you're going to get a crop off of them, and they don't freeze or die from the frost. So we got our fall carrots and our fall beans planted.
When canning, it's important to use the correct jar for what you're canning. For example, you don't want to use a quart jar for jam because that's going to be a lot of jam and you might not be able to finish it in time once you open it. So smaller jars are things for like mustards and jams. This is a 4-ounce jar, or you could do a traditional half-pint jar like this. This is kind of a fancier half-pint jar, but these are good for smaller things that you're not going to consume a lot of at one time, like jam and mustard, and even things like something like cowboy candy. You're not getting a lot of it. Pint jars are good for pickles, relishes, and even, you know, smaller batches of bigger things. So if you want to eat, maybe there's just 2 of you, want to can this smaller, you can do that. Quart jars are good for pickles, whole fruits, like for example we have pears in here, and you could even do different pie fillings in there as well, because a quart jar with pie filling basically fills up a whole jar. Now, half-gallon jars are not safe for canning in, but you can do freezing and refrigerator things in those. So you can go ahead and use those for that type of use. So make sure you use the right jar for what you're going to be using it for.
When you've harvested one crop, it's a perfect opportunity to put another crop in the garden, but you've got to be certain of what you're putting in. We've removed our garlic from this particular raised berm, and we're going to replace it with beets. Beets is another great crop that you can grow all summer long. So we're just going to go ahead and plant it, and in about 60 to 70 days, it'll be up and growing, and hopefully we'll have good bulbs. But again, you want to just not let this bed lay dormant. If you have the opportunity to plant something else, do some research based on your growing zone of what you could potentially put a second crop in of whatever vegetable you enjoy most to maximize your growing capabilities. Volunteers in your garden may not be a bad thing if you're talking about kids coming over to help you weed. But volunteer plants are sometimes good, sometimes bad, based on the type of plant that came up. Now, for many of these plants, if you just let them go, they will drop their fruit or put seed pods on and drop the seed pods, and they'll come back next year. Such as radishes, those are okay to leave. Now, on the other hand, in our somewhat weeded potato patch, this is not necessarily a good thing if you have potatoes that's come up from a previous year. The reason being is potatoes are susceptible to late blight as well as early blight. They're different in disease-wise. Early blight is a soil bacteria that splashes up on the leaves. Late blight is an airborne bacteria that can spread very rapidly in a region. If you've had late blight or experienced it on your potato plants, for example, last year, and they begin to come up again this year, or if you had it this year and they come up next year, you want to go ahead and dig them out. We all want to leave the potato in the ground and get a few extra potatoes. But that disease can still be alive in the potato, and when that potato comes up, it can spread to other portions of the garden. So that's something you want to keep in mind. But volunteers, as in pumpkins, are a good thing in most cases, and we'll look at that now. Pumpkins sometimes come up on their own. Now, we've got 2 different types of squash here. We've got a butternut squash here in the center, and then we have a pumpkin of some variety is coming up and started here. And the reason why is because when we built our compost pile last fall and incorporated all the leaves on the property, we threw in some pears, remains, as well as some rotting pumpkins, and this is the result of that. And the reason why the seeds did not break down or did not get hot enough is because leaves are more of a brown material, and it didn't heat up enough, 160 degrees, for 3 consecutive days to kill the germination in the seed. So for most part, this is okay, and we do have a couple of other pumpkins that are coming up amongst our tomatoes, and we're just going to leave those alone. We do have one little pumpkin beginning to grow on this particular pumpkin, so we'll just see what happens. It's not hurting anything, and if we get a pumpkin out of it, so what? Another thing we're going to look at is Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes. These can be very, very rapidly spreaders, even when you do your best to eradicate them from your garden. These are Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes in some people's vocabulary. It's a root vegetable. It's got a tuber. It's related to the potato and the sunflower. It's very good for diabetics, and you don't have to cook it to eat it. Now, we only harvested a very small percentage of the tubers that we had in the ground last year. We started out with 18 plants. And because we didn't harvest all of them, every tuber that we didn't harvest grew another stalk. And we've quadrupled, if not more, the crop that we have in this one little area. Now, on this side here, we did plant carrots. And I did my best to get rid of the artichokes. I sifted the soil 2 or 3 times, and we see we have 1, 2, 3, a half dozen to a dozen artichoke plants here. Now, not necessarily artichokes or a food that grows itself at a rapid pace such as sunchokes is a bad thing, but you do want to be very cautious of where you do plant it because it voluntarily comes up whether you want it or not. But again, it's a food that you don't have to do much maintenance on. Thanks for watching. I'm Joey Baird. This has been the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. Join us next time for more organic gardening and food preservation.
For more information, please visit thewwisconsinvegetablegardener.com.